Dr. Clarence B. Jones, that's my godfather. He went to school with my mother, actually, graduated from high school together. But, of course, he's the closest thing to Martin Luther King that anyone's going to get. He's 94 now. He'll be 94 tomorrow. Matter of fact, he's born in January as well. And of course, the two most powerful stories that I got from him while traveling around and just, picking his brain about Martin Luther King, one was the whole fact he shared this story about Martin Luther King, and he called him Martin because they were friends as well. How if they were traveling anywhere, they might be walking down the street, maybe in the South, in the North, and there was some type of loud noise, or there was some type of ruckus that happens, or backfire from a car. The first person that would cower and die on the ground would be Martin Luther King. And he says, he said Martin Luther King was personally afraid yet fearless, personally afraid yet fearless. And I couldn't get that around my head. And then he told this story as they would be walking somewhere. Um, if some loud noise happened, he would jump on the ground, he would cower. And it was because they all knew that it wasn't a matter of if he was going to be assassinated, but when. And yet, every day he went out with that kind of mentality. So he was personally afraid yet fearless. And what that told me was that, and I tell this to young kids, and Martin Luther King was a young man. He died before he was 40. He was assassinated before he was 40. He was a doctor. He had his doctorate by the time he was 26. Most people don't know. But the thing that it tells me is that you can be personally afraid, but fearless. And when you have truth, like this whole side, and we'll talk about the whole satyagraha. I know I'm going to kill that word, but I want to say it in its Sanskrit. That whole concept of this universal truth and how it empowers you. The truth is that he knew something might destroy his body, but nothing would destroy his mission and why he was here. And that's how we should live every day. I do things, I'm personally afraid, but I go out fearless. And so that's one of my favorite stories about Martin Luther King and just that whole concept. The other one, of course, everyone wants to know when you talk to Dr. Jones is, okay, so you're writing his speeches and you got to tell us about the I Have a Dream speech. How did that come about? And it's interesting because, he was also his attorney, so they're out raising money, funds. They all got together the night before that speech was supposed to happen, and everybody was given there was a, team of them, and they were all giving some ideals about what should be in the speech. And of course, Dr. Jones, I call him Dr. Jones, even though he's got my godfather. Um, he was saying how even though he was Martin Luther King's draft speechwriter, it was all concepts that would come from him, and then he would read them over, and then he would change, and he would make the necessary things that he needed done. But that night in the hotel before they all got together, and then Dr. Jones went up to his room and of course put all these concepts together. And, he puts this amazing speech together. He had just been to Rockefeller to borrow money or to solicit funds for the whole movement. And so he starts out about this, check. And you can read everybody knows the gist of the speech. So, he's writing eloquently, connecting all the dots. And sure enough, so Martin Luther King's, he starts this speech and it's, it's emotional. People are getting involved in it. And all of a sudden, Mahalia Jackson, who was like the most popular gospel singer at the time, she's a really good friend of Martin Luther King's. And she's one of the few women, if not the only woman that was on the stage during that speech in the march on Washington. And, he's giving this speech, he's reading word for word what Dr. Jones has written. And then Mahalia Jackson from the back, from behind, she's like, Martin, tell him about the dream. Tell him about the dream. And so
Ah,
Dr. Jones is like, all of a sudden he takes his notes that he has and the way he tells it is way better. And he puts it to the side. And what came from him from that I Have a Dream from that point on was all just what was inside of Martin Luther King. And, when I think about Martin Luther King and what he said there, He said, I have a dream that my four children one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And if that is not soul consciousness and what Brahma Baba has been presenting to us, our first universal truth of soul consciousness, I don't know what is. And so that's so powerful to me because, Martin Luther King was on this mission. He was a divine soul, he was a spiritual. And so when he was seeking out truth, and that's why he also went to India, which most people don't know about as well. I know that's a long drawn out, but those are my two probably most power. And he's got tons of stories, but those two really touched me in a way that I live by every day. Personally afraid, yet fearless, and then also this universal truth of soul consciousness. There's no fear when you are soul conscious. That time is an illusion, right? This is what I get from it anyway. This is my belief. And, whenever people are talking, we get it all the time. Now everybody is an expert on everything. Don't take anything I say as, the gospel truth. It's just what I believe. For me, time is just an illusion. The only time we have is this present moment. Like that's all we have. And that's how these spiritual leaders, I believe. If you look at Jesus Christ, he was crucified when he was 33. So time and age is just it's a social construct, right? Age is a social construct. If we're eternal beings, if we're pure, positive, powerful, unlimited, peaceful energy that can't be destroyed or created, a matter of 30 years, what does that mean? So we should all be living. That's the other thing that Martin Luther King teaches me, and is that we should be living with a sense of urgency. The time is itself is time for change. And he said it. One of my favorite quotes from him, I always quote him, the time is always right to do what is right. And so with young people, these energies, and I say we're all superstars. That's how we can relate. I'm a former athlete, of course. We're all superstars. This energy, the age, people of your certain age, if you're too young, they're going to treat you inferiorly or, disregard you. If you're too old, so you have to discard that. You have to go with what's within you, that universal truth, what Gandhi talked about, that satyagraha. You have to, if you hold on to that, just cling on to it, then age is just a number, as they say. So that's another thing that Martin Luther King teaches us. And he spoke pretty fairly often about this sense of urgency. I remember some of his speeches it's this sense of urgency. And sometimes I'll use that myself. Like there's a sense of urgency. I have to get it done. I need to do what I was put here to do. And I think we all should live that way. Today, in Gyan, we know that we're living in a confluence age, but I say we're right in the middle of the fake news, artificial intelligence. In the whole term, it's artificial, untruth, right? Falsehood, social media craze, influencers. Every person now, you can't get away with not having the world at your hands with a cell phone in your hands. And so, what I tell young people or energies in young bodies, the example that you gave, like with Martin Luther King or with Jesus, as far as them being, starting out at a young age, I think about myself. Some of the things I'm being recognized for now, and Hall of Fames, the books I'm writing, it's things that I did when I was in my teens, in my 20s. If that makes any sense, it's important. Like the moment that you're in as a young person, I think it's easier to stick to your mission. Like no one was going to deter me from playing sports, playing basketball, even though at the time Women weren't playing sports. It wasn't cool like it is now, and it's still not, totally accepted. No scholarships for women. My mother was out of her mind about me playing outside with the boys, going overseas without any professional leagues here. And yet I was following myself because I knew who I was. I wasn't going to be labeled, as my color or religion or a sex or a gender. And I think we lose that because we get influenced. I think it's even worse for young people today because they have that access 24/7 from around the world right there in a minute. Whereas for us, yeah, I could get it when I went outside and someone told me, listen, you don't belong here. You're a girl, go home, do the dishes or whatever. So what I tell young people, stick to what makes your heart sing. And sometimes that's your parents are not gonna understand. Your classmates may not understand. You may not always understand it, but I think we all have that innate yearning, like that sense of urgency that if you follow that, it's going to take you where you need to be. But most of us, because of this age of, social media craze, influencers, fake news, artificial intelligence, that's coming from some warped human mind, which is not a universal eternal truth. Stick with what you know to be truth and don't believe anything that you see. Don't even believe me. You go find out for yourself. As a historian, that's what I do. And even with facts, even with science, I just heard this the other day. Science, they're all hypotheses. Like they're trying to prove them wrong. So it's not even a fact. So, but the universal truth, like the bottom line truth, we all know what it is, right, Gayatri Ben? Soul consciousness. You cannot get around. That's just a basis. If you go with that, you won't be destroyed or created. Your energy, you always exist. Your love, your purity, your power, your peace, your happy, your wisdom. If you stick with that, you're going to be okay. Most of the time, young people know better than we are, more convinced better than we are, but we end up, after so many times of people, telling you no, then it changes who you are. And there's a research that's done. Um, by the time you're in, I don't know, 8 or 9, you've heard no so many times, and that changes who you are. As you know how we are with kids. No, don't do that. First, you're wanting them to do. No, don't say that. Don't do this. And so you have to really instill in them that, know that universal truth. You are, I say it easily, a superstar. Pure, positive, powerful, peaceful, unlimited energy. Now go take on the day. Oh, in the eternal truth of Satyagraha, I would say be truth, share truth, cling to truth, hold fast to truth, insist on truth, have a firm adherence to truth, no matter what. Search for the truth, and then you'll be free indeed.